Rambam. We are doing the laws, gifts to the poor. Oops, let's get there. That was Chumash from before.
Chapter 2?
Yes.
Not
Correctement.
any food that grows from the earth? Okay.
Rambam, Matnasaniyim, the gifts to the poor, chapter 2. Any food that grows from the earth is guarded, is harvested at the same time, and is placed in storage. Is required that paya be separated from it. Paya, the corners of the fields, right? What we spoke about yesterday. So this verse says, when you reap the harvest of your land. So in other words, it's a guarded field to be harvested. In other words, it's not just a empty field, right? In other words, you don't need to leave the corners of your field if it's just an empty field that you're not growing anything on it. So if it's guarded, you've grown something and therefore harvested. From there, you have to leave the corners of your field, right? That's what the verse says. Halacha number 2. Anything that resembles a crop that is harvested by having these 5 qualities require paya to be separated from grain, legumes, carobs, nuts, almonds, pomegranates, grapes, olives, dates, whether dried or fresh, and any similar produce. By contrast, indigo, rubia, and the like are exempt. Why? Because they are not food, right? They're whatchamacallit, they're used to dry for dye. They're for dye.
Yeah.
They're for dye, not for food. It's only food that you have to leave the corners of your field.
Cheese or indigo? Cheese or indigo.
Yeah?
They're called indigo.
Okay. Perfect. Similarly, truffles and mushrooms are exempt because they do not grow from the earth like other produce of the earth. Right?
They're fungus.
They're fungus. They don't have roots in the earth through which they derive nurture. Right? How do you know that though? Because it says you harvest your land. So it has something that's from the land. Right?
That has roots.
It has roots. Right. It's part of the land, meaning it's getting nurture from the land. That's what it means. Otherwise, it's then not part of the land, so therefore it's not included. Right? So that's interesting how they, similarly, ownerless produce is exempt, for there is no one to watch it. Because it means guarded land. It means that if someone owns the land, it's guarded. Guarded doesn't mean you're watching it. You fenced it in, that means it's guarded. Right?
Okay. So it doesn't, okay. It has to be guarded.
Or it is free for anyone to take. Because if it's owner of this land, right? Or produce, the owner of this produce. Now there's something growing wild, so you don't have to make paya then, right? Similarly, figs are exempt because they are not harvested at one time. Because it has to be harvested at one time. Instead, on the tree, they are some that will be ripe on one day and others will be ripe until after several days. Similarly, vegetables are exempt, for they are not placed in storage. Because what we said in the beginning is it has to be guarded, it has to be placed in storage. That's when you have to, right?
Right.
Because the harvest, so what you're reaping of the harvest, where do you get storage? I'm not clear from the verse how you get storage. Okay. So
we're talking about grain, more or less. More or less, it's all harvested at the same time.
No, we said before grain, legumes.
You said legumes.
Carobs.
They don't harvest at the same time, legumes. I don't understand.
No, figs don't. Legumes seem to do. Nuts, almonds, pomegranates, grapes, olives, dates, those things, yes. Guys, we got to go back to the farm so we can learn what it means, all these things and experience it.
Do I get to pick from the corners?
No, you're not poor. You come here, you're rich. Garlic and onions require peya to be separated, for they are dried out and placed in storage. Similarly, it is seed onions that are placed in the earth to produce seed require peya to be given from them. Similar laws apply in analogous situations. A portion of land of any size requires peya to be separated from its produce. This applies even if it belongs to partners. For the proof text states, the harvest of your land. It's artzachem. It's plural, right? It's plural you, not singular you.
Universal.
Plural, it's called, not universal.
Okay.
Right?
Mhm.
Meaning partners is plural, right?
Mhm.
Even if it belongs to many people. When non-Jews harvested the field for their own sake, thieves harvested, ants destroyed its produce, or the wind or an animal crushed it, is exempt from peya. For the obligation relies on standing grain. So a non-Jew is harvesting for the Jew, then peya has to be left. But if it's their own field, they're not obligated to do this. A non-Jew is not obligated to do this, right?
But could a Jew still take the corners of the harvest from a Jewish
No, because a non-Jew is not obligated.
I mean, I know they're not obligated, but could a Jew still take?
How could they take if it belongs to the non-Jew? You'd be a thief. If the field belongs to a non-Jew, and a poor person went and took from the corners, it'd be like a thief. Torah says that the corners don't belong to you.
Oh, okay.
Right? Torah says that. Otherwise, it belongs to you. Right?
Yeah.
But the non-Jew belongs to him. So you have to ask permission. Remember, we learned yesterday, peya, you don't have to ask permission. Right? It's the opposite. The owner of it can't give it out to who he wants to the poor person that he likes. Right? Because it doesn't even belong to him. Yeah. Halacha number 5. Wow, this is fascinating stuff.
Mhm. Okay.
If he harvested half of it, and thief harvested the remaining half, it is exempt, for the obligation was incumbent on the half that was harvested by thieves. For the obligation was incumbent. The peya is included in standing grain, since that was stolen by thieves is considered as if they stole the portion due to the poor.
No way around it, eh?
What if the other way around? If, however, thieves harvested half of it, and the owner harvested the remaining half, he should leave pay according to the measure of that what it was he harvested. In other words, you're leaving after the harvest, right? What are you leaving? Your corners. So if the thieves took the second, you did half, and now you woke up in the morning, thieves took the other half. So, right? You have nothing left. They took the corners. You're not obliged to give the corners because it was taken. Yeah, half. I'm talking about half.
So we still have to remain.
But if it was the other way around, the thieves took the first half. Now you're obliged to, from the second half, to leave corners, because there is, of a second half, there's corners left. In other words, remember we learned yesterday, what happens if you, what does it mean? If the thieves took the second half, right? So you might say, oh, from the first half, I didn't leave because it was the second half, and I was from the second half I was going to leave, right? The corners. So you might say, oh, but the obligation would be now bake from the wheat bread and give the bread to the poor. No, you don't have to. Because the obligation is to leave after the harvest. But the thieves took it. So you're not obliged then. Right? Again, we're learning the parameter of the law. Right? Does that mean, by the way, that you can't give? Of course you can give. That's not the point. You can do anything you want. You can give, I mean, not anything you want in giving, right? You can give. That's not a point of what. That's not the point we're doing over here. You say, well, thieves took, but there's a bunch of poor people I know come to my field, and they're not going to have now because thieves took, so I'm going to give. Good, you could give, but it's not an obligation. We're talking about what the law is and what the obligation is.
If he still owns it.
No, that's not the point.
If the thieves took it.
The thieves took it second. Here's your field. You took half. You're supposed to leave, right? You're supposed to leave the corners after you finish, right? Leave the corners. You harvest, leave the corners. So you took half. You're not finished. So of course you're not going to leave the corners, right? You're going to leave it, what's left over, but you took half. Let's say you took half like this, whatever, right? And now thieves took the rest. So there's no corners left. So you might think, so, okay, so I'll be obligated to take from the grain to give bread. No, you're not. Because you're only obligated from after reaping the field, harvesting the field, to leave the corners. But the corners were taken by thieves. So you're not obligated anymore. That's all. Simple. Okay? Don't complicate it.
We complicated. No.
But if it was the other way around, you harvested the second half, then you have to leave. Because, okay, you only have to leave from the half, because the first half was stolen. But from the half that's left, you have to leave. Because when you complete your half that was left over from the thieves, well, it is harvesting the whole thing. So from that half, leave over. Then you have to leave the corners. Yeah, that's what we're talking about. We're only talking about corners here. If he harvested a half and sold the remaining half, the purchaser must leave payoff for the entire field. Oh, you harvested half. Now you sold the remaining half. The purchaser now is obliged, right? Because remember, if it was my field, I'm only obliged after harvesting it, but I sold it now. So the purchaser is now obliged to leave payoff because it's his field now. Right? But he has to leave. Why the entire field? That I don't get. Doesn't own the entire field.
Which is basically the title.
Complicated.
Interesting. In other words, the purchaser recognizes that he took half of the crop already. So in the purchase, he's acknowledging that he has to give payoff from the entire field, even though he only bought half. Because why should the poor lose out? Because the field was sold. So they should get from the whole thing. If he harvested half and consecrated half, now it's different. He harvested half, and the second half he consecrated. What does it mean? To temple treasury, it belongs, right?
Mm-hmm.
Now the person who redeems the half from temple treasury must leave payoff for the entire field also. That's interesting. For the purchase of the field of the temple treasury will be the understanding they must leave payoff for the entire field. So he's got to leave for the entire field. Huh? Yeah, from the half that you bought from the temple treasury, even that you have to give from the entire field, because that's the understanding. In other words, remember, think about it this way. Think about it this way. Got a pen? Here. Here. Here we go, right? Here's your field. These four corners, who do they belong to? They can belong to the poor. They belong to the poor, right? So you did half your field. Let's say that, inside here, you didn't do the corners, right? Then you sold the rest. Or you consecrated. You consecrated. This was a consecrated, right? Did you take away that this belongs inherently to the poor? You don't take that away because you consecrated it. Because remember, the temple treasury isn't interested in land. Why not? Because they can't use land. They need the money so they can buy animals for the altar and whatever else, the upkeep of the temple and so on and so forth. That's what they need. They don't need land. So it didn't take away. So consecrating it meant that it belongs to the temple treasury. It doesn't belong now to an individual, the other half of the land, but there's still an inherent obligation over here for these corners to the poor. That didn't go away because it was consecrated. So therefore, when the person purchased that half of the land, what they have to do is leave. Even though they only got half the land, they have to leave all four corners as if it was the whole land. Got it? Amazing.
Your diagram can get perfectly clear.
Yeah, that's why I figured it would help. Right. If he harvested half the land and consecrated what he harvested, half the land and consecrated what he harvested. Now he consecrated what he harvested. He should leave payah for the entire land from the remainder of the crop.
6.
Huh?
We're already 6.
No, the end of 5. I just finished.
Okay. Well, that's what we just said.
No, here it's he consecrated what he harvested. So you might think again that he didn't get benefit. What's the chiddush over here? What's the novel thought over here?
What?
He didn't get benefit. When do I have to give to the poor? When I got benefit. But I didn't get benefit because I consecrated the whole thing to everything, all my produce I consecrated. So I didn't get benefit. So why do I have to leave for the poor? No, because inherently it belonged to the poor anyways. That's the novel thought over here.
So it just takes away from giving to the temple.
No, what you gave? No, that's not the point. No. Why would that? What you consecrated here? You didn't consecrate property. You consecrated the produce,
But you
what you harvested, right? So that means, so maybe you might think that when do you have to give the corners of the field is when you benefited from your harvest. No, you consecrated it, so you didn't benefit. You gave it away to the temple. Now the temple is going to sell it, whatever. That's irrelevant, right? But you didn't get benefit. So maybe I don't have to leave my corners of the field. Maybe only when I get benefit from my produce do I have to give to the poor. But if I didn't get benefit, it's like I went to work. I didn't make money, but I still have to give charity. I went to work and all of my money I gave to the temple treasury. Now, do I? Yeah, well, okay, that's not a good example. I still have to give tzedakah. Yeah, that's a different. That's not a good example.
You give the corners to the temple.
No.
So you give them.
No,
You don't give.
No, if you gave the corners to the temple, it doesn't take away the corners have to be given to the poor. Because remember, it has to be redeemed, the field anyways. Temple's not using, temple treasury's not using the field. Right? They're not going and getting people to work the field and now leave the corners. They're going to sell it. So implied in that is when it was consecrated to the temple treasury, whoever's going to redeem it, to buy it, is going to have to leave all the corners. That's what's implied.
Beautiful.
Okay. Got it? Okay. Huh? Breaking our head. Sorry to break your head. Okay, the following rules apply. Huh?
I'm learning.
Following rules apply. when a person harvests some of the grapes in his vineyard to sell in the marketplace, but the intent to leave the remainder for the vat to press for wine. So he's got two things he's doing here, right? He's selling grapes in the marketplace, and some of the remainder, right? He's going to use the vat for the press. All right. What does that mean? If he would harvest for the marketplace from either side of the vineyard, he should give payah for the grapes that he harvested for the vat according to the amount that remained. If he would harvest for the marketplace only one side, he should leave the amount of pay appropriate for the entire field from the amount remaining. The rationale is that since he harvested from only one side, he is not considered as harvesting haphazardly, in which instance he would be exempt from leaving payah. Similarly, the person who harvests ears of corn bit by bit and brings them home, he's exempt from leket, shicha, and payah, even if he harvests his entire field in this manner. In other words, the point is over here. Harvesting means that you're harvesting. You're not just like taking a little here, a little there type of thing, right? That's the point, right? Harvest means you're right. So if you're now doing that in your grapes in the vineyard to sell in the marketplace, right? So in the first one, he was doing it haphazardly, right?
Why didn't do it all at once also?
Right, because he was doing it from here and from there. Harvest means it's like a coordinated, orderly manner in how you harvest, right? But if you're taking a little here, a little there, and so on, so that means you're not really harvesting. That's the point.
Okay.
But so then he has to give payah only for the grapes that he harvests for the vat, not from what he took haphazardly. But what he took for the vat, that's not haphazard, right? In other words, to make wine as opposed to having grapes. But if he took from one side only, that's not haphazard. That's what you take. You go methodically, right? So that means he's harvesting, therefore leave. But right, that's so likewise when it comes to ears of grain, if you're taking a little here, a little there, bits, to bring home, that's not called harvest. Therefore, it's only when you're harvesting that you're obliged, leket, shich, and payah, right? The three things, what you forgot, the corners and the sheaf, a bundle, right? Even if you did the entire field this way, that's kind of haphazard, then you're not obliged. Okay, wow. Okay, I'd like to continue, but
You should do till 11. It's true.
yeah, a lot of things. All right, folks.
I'm not getting my full worth there.
Yeah,
So the poor are really protected.
very much so.
Poor are very holy.
Yeah.
Thank you, Rabbi. Good day.
God bless you all.
That's not considered.
You also.
Not at all.
It's the gifts to the poor. This is what it's called. It's not what we call tzedakah,
Okay, that's what
right? It's not the law of charity, even though this is being charitable, right? But it's a different law. It's not the law of, you earned money and now you have to give from your money. That's a different law, right? Because the money that you earn, you could choose where to give it. Here you have no choice. Right? You can't even choose which poor person you're going to give it to because it's not a handout that you're giving. It's something they take on their own. You don't own it, exactly.
But for charity, you would own
Yeah, you own the money, and now you will have the right to give it to who you want, or what institution you want, right?
Mhm.